This is Jacqueline Barcroft with the State Police Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division. And I also have Rob Dale today presenting from the Ingham County Emergency Management Homeland Security. We are going to go over the basics of public alerting in Michigan today. For this webinar, the webinar will be recorded and we will be posting it on the public alerting work group page for reference down the road. So we're hoping it'll be a good resource you can point new folks to just get them a quick basic overview about alerts and warnings in Michigan. So in case some of your other folks weren't able to attend today, we will be able to share that recording out in the future here. I do have everybody muted for now, but feel free to use the chat and we'll do our best to answer the chat along the way. And at the end, we can open everything up if there's any other questions that somebody would like to talk through. And I am going to we're going to keep our videos off today. So we just focus on the presentation for the recording. But again, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. All right. All right, so kicking things off here, kind of starting at the beginning, there's been various methods of alerting the public during emergencies for years. It's been around for decades. As technology has enhanced, the way that this messaging is sent out to the public has changed and evolved along the way. Started with just TV and radio and has morphed to include not only that, but also cell phones and various other technologies as well. And also it has allowed various levels of government to be able to send out these alerts and warnings to their public, depending on what is going on. This is a slide. It's kind of busy, but it's the basic IPAWS structure. So IPAWS is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It's a system that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has put together in order to send out these alerts and warnings, be able to get these messages out quickly, all to various pathways. And so kind of the key takeaways from this slide is alerting authorities happen at various levels of government. You need some sort of software tool in order to be able to enter your messages in and connect to the IPAWS system. The IPAWS system will then verify, who that alerting authority is and what their permissions are. And then you can seamlessly send out information to various pathways at one time, so that you are hitting the public with this important emergency messages in a variety of ways, depending on where they are and what they have available to them. And really where a lot of the alerts start are at the local level. So it's mostly what we're seeing are the local governments that are sending out these messages for various things, hazardous chemical spills, fires, different things that the public may have to know about in case, or to be able to take protective actions to protect themselves. And one of the nice things about using the IPAWS system, it uses a format called Common Alerting Protocol, or CAP. And that the reason that they designed it that way is it allows it to expand to future technologies. So various things can read that messaging, and you can see that the messages can go to some electronic billboards, to kiosks, to different technologies that folks have in their home, can take in that CAP, that IPAWS feed, and display those warnings to the public. So when to use and what to use. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we're going to talk about a few of them specifically in this webinar. in more detail. But we have the emergency alert system, which goes out over TV and radio. We have wireless emergency alerts, which comes through cell phones. The All Hazards NOAA weather radio, which hoping everybody has in their homes, again, to broadcast not only weather alerts, but we can also send non-weather emergency messages via that pathway. Social media, news releases, the list goes on and on. There's various ways that you can alert the public, and when something happens, you need to choose which tool is most appropriate for that particular situation. And this is where you want to make sure you have good plans in place, templates in place to help you decide quickly on which method you want to use. So selecting the right best tool, some things to consider. With wireless emergency alerts, it's something has happened that you need to get everybody's attention immediately. You also are able, with wireless emergency alerts or WIA messages, you're able to kind of limit down that scope of who you're messaging to a very small geographical area. It doesn't have to go out countywide if it's something that's just happening in a couple block area of a particular city. So it's something that is serious that you need to get their attention for. And you can get that information out quickly. However, it's not a replacement for an opt-in mass notification system that a community might have to, let them know that there's going to be some road work on a particular road, or, the county fair is going on and you should avoid this area for traffic considerations. Those types of things are not what WIA is for. It's for serious situations that could cause death or serious injury. We also have the emergency alert system, or EAS, and that's what goes over TV and radio, traditional system that we think of. Similar to WIA, where you're getting the attention of the folks who are listening to that, but it's something you would use this if it's something that's more widespread, because you can only limit it to going out to the county. And honestly, it goes out past county boundaries, depending on wherever the broadcast area is for that TV or radio station. So you do have to be very cognizant if you're going to use EAS. It's something that affects, a large portion of the county. Social media is a must to go along with these other tools, because that's where a lot of the public is going to go to get more information. So, make sure that you have plans in place to not only send out the WIA or the EAS, but also point them to your social media where they can go to get updates. So something else to consider. But the whole goal is, using multiple alerting methods to reduce what's called milling time, or time that the public is going to try and decide if it's affecting them, if it's a real situation, figuring out what they're going to do. The more that they get that information quickly, the quicker that they will act as you want them to. And as Dr. Dennis Moletti said, there's never has been and there never will be a silver bullet for disseminating warning messages. One technology is not enough. You definitely need to layer your approach to getting that information out. So I'm going to go over a few best practices for EAS messaging first. So a couple of things to consider. Make sure these types of things are trained on and are in your plans. The message that you send for an EAS message, as it's read out, cannot be longer than 2 minutes in length. The way that the system works, it will get cut off at that point and you will not get the full message out. So it needs to be succinct, to the point of what you are trying to relay. It's always best practice to record the message in your own voice for the EAS message. Don't rely on, the computer generated voice that, folks don't like to necessarily record their own voice, but really you're going to be able to speak the language clearly. And the public is going to hear a human voice on the other side and pay more attention to that rather than just a computer generated message that they may associate it with spam or things that are not legit. And then, as I mentioned before, you can only alert countywide, nothing smaller than that. So in your EAS message, if you do choose to send that out, make sure it's very clear where that emergency is happening in your message. So, stating specifically, and we're going to talk about this more, but since this does go to such a wide audience, you have to be very clear in what your message says. But be prudent when you're sending out EAS messages. You are interrupting paid broadcasts, so keep that in mind. You don't want to overuse it. You want to make sure that what you're using it for is legitimate and that you're sending life-saving information. Get to know your local primary stations, your broadcast station folks, so that you can work with them and they're happy to test things out with you, answer any questions that you might have, and you would both understand the process of, what the plans are for sending out these types of emergency alerts. And then, of course, always coordinate with your public information officer, your PIO, to get when you send these messages out, because they can help you, work with the media to get out additional information and answer any questions. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about WEA a little bit, or the wireless emergency alerts that go over your cell phones. So with WEA, there is some key things to think about. First and foremost is the handling code. So each event code, the types of emergencies that you would notify for like an evacuation or a hazardous material warning, they each have a default handling code, imminent threat or public safety. In your system, whatever software tool you use, you are able to override that. So you want to think about, when you're sending these messages out, how it's going to go through. So if you choose the imminent threat option, that's something that's very serious. People could die or be seriously injured if they don't get that information right away. What that is going to do, it's going to override any silent settings on your phone. So if you have your phone on do not disturb silent, it's going to override that, and it's going to make the tone, and you will hear that message. So it's something that you for sure will get everybody's attention with. Whereas the public safety setting, this is something that it's still significant, but if you don't get that message immediately, it's probably not going to kill you. Like a 911 outage, it's serious if you need to call 911. Folks need to know that the lines may be having issues at the moment, but you don't need to wake them up, in the middle of the night or anything like that with that type of message. So that's when the public safety type setting would be more appropriate. And that handling code, at least for iPhones, and it will honor any settings that you have on your phone for do not disturb and whatnot. So the message would still come through, but it just won't alert you with the tone and all of that right away. And this is kind of an outline of the different event codes, which really don't matter as far as WEA goes, because that event code information doesn't come through in the message. But this is just how they are default set, which ones are imminent threat and which ones are public safety. But again, you can override those settings. As far as WEA goes, it definitely is something that we see more use of because you can limit the geographic area that these are sent to. So if it's something happening in a very small area, you can still alert everybody in that area. And while, of course, not everybody has a cell phone, it does get a large portion of the population, whether that they're residents that live there or just folks passing through could get that information. So in 2023, there were about 91 WIA messages sent throughout the state, and some of these are weather-related messages sent from the National Weather Service as well. But it kind of gives you, on the left-hand side there, an idea of what some of these messages were. I would definitely recommend everybody gets familiar with the PBS Warn site. The website's right there on the screen. That is a place you can go to not only see any live messages that are out in the system, out across the country, but it also allows you to filter for previous messaging that had been sent. So you can kind of look back and see the history of all of the WIA messages sent across the country. And you can filter it down to a state too. So a lot of great information can be found on the PBS Warn website. Highly recommend folks take a look at that. So some of the common errors that we see with WIA messaging. Definitely things to consider. Make sure that they're in your plans and procedures to do this the right way. So we have the urgency, severity, and certainty settings in your message. Those all have to be at the top setting, otherwise the WIA message won't go out, meaning it's the very worst thing that's going on. It's urgent. We need to get this message out quickly. Other issues that we see would be drawing a polygon or a circle outside of your permitted area. So when you work with FEMA to get your alerting authority status set up, you are designated to alert in a particular area, typically in a county, one county. Unless you have some cross-border MOUs in place, if you draw your polygon outside of that area, that message is not going to go through. When you're drawing your polygon, drawing your area on with your software tool, make sure that it closes the right way. Depending on what your software is, let the software close the polygon for you. Don't have crisscross lines as you're drawing the shape. Different things like that, where I would, again, recommend practicing as much as possible with your software so you're very familiar with that. Additionally, if you get a GIS shapefile, maybe from your mapping folks of particular areas that you want to have preset, it can't have more than 100 points or vertices in it, or again, that will not go through in the WIA system. And then while having templates and things like that ready in your plan, you need to make sure that you read through what message you actually are sending at the time. So we don't want to leave that template wording of add message here or just emergency alert in your fields, because that is going to lead to confusion and all sorts of things. So you want to make sure you're double checking what you're putting in those message spots. Issues that we've seen where you think you're sending it out to a test message out and it goes out live, or vice versa. But definitely it's a big issue if you're trying to send that test message out and accidentally goes out live. Definitely need to be careful of that in your messaging, and we'll talk about this more, but you need to have clear messaging. Don't use abbreviations or things that the general public is not going to be aware of. In your messages that you send out via WIA, it needs to have information on where the location of the hazard is. Where is the problem? Where do they need to keep aware of? Who is sending the message? An authoritative source so that they know that they can trust the information in there. And as I mentioned before, including a link for more information, including a link is great. That is going to be part of your limitation on the number of characters. Definitely would recommend sending it to information and to X or Twitter, because their servers definitely could handle that if your organization has a Twitter account that can share information. Be careful if you're just pointing it to a government website, because sometimes they can't handle, a million clicks at once as somebody's trying to get to that information. So, and, just in general, make sure that the link works. So always test that information before you're sending it out. Other issues that we see is folks not updating or canceling the message when the emergency has subsided. Make sure that follow-up information or is relayed, and or when it's all taken care of, that message still isn't out there, alerting new folks who come into that area. And then please, please, please make sure you are creating both a 360 character message and a 90 character message. The 90 character message is required. You do have to have that, but most people receive the 360 character message. So take your time pulling that message together, making sure it has all of the required elements for a good message, and then narrow that message down to 90 characters, which is still required, but very few folks get that one. So spend your time on the 360 character one. As I mentioned, when the threat is over, make sure that you are updating and canceling that initial message. So cell towers, depending on your software, for however long you set that WIA message to go, to broadcast, could be an hour, it could be 23 hours. That tower is going to continue relaying that message out to any new folks that come into your area after it was issued until it expires. So it's really important, once that emergency is done, that you are really the preference is to update it. And again, each software tool is a little bit different on how this works. But when you update the message, it will cancel that original one and allow you to put out a new message stating that the emergency is over and, everything is all clear, however you want to word that. Just canceling the message stops it from stops the cell towers from sending that out any further, but it doesn't kind of close the circle and let the public know that everything is okay now. So make sure that these types of things are in your plans and procedures and you test them out. It's super important to test this out and practice it. Kind of went over this, the update versus cancel. The important thing is to not just send out a second message without canceling the first, because then you'll have two messages kind of live coming off those towers until the expiration date happens. The WIA overshoot. So when you send a message out, it is broadcast from a cell tower. Now with the WIA 3.0, phones, and honestly, like a good chunk of the phones out there, over 90% are at this level of the 3.0. They are going to your message is not going to overshoot more than 1/10 of a mile outside of that polygon you drew. Previously, it was the messages were being broadcast from the cell towers, and they would often hit people outside of that boundary that you drew. Now with the update with 3.0, WIA 3.0, it's staying pretty close and pretty true to that polygon that you drew. Now, I'm not saying that it never is going to go outside of that, which is why it's really important that in your message you state for where the emergency is. But again, as technology evolves, we are getting better and better at really pinpointing where that emergency message broadcast is going to go. All of the carriers, the Verizons, the T-Mobile, the AT&Ts of the world, on their website somewhere, you should be able to find a list of which, the various phones, and if they're 3.0 compatible. That's something that you may need to reference if you're getting a lot of complaints that, folks are getting the message where they shouldn't. So just keep that in mind. All right. And now we're going to talk about writing effective WIA messages, and I'm going to kick it over to Rob to go over this portion.
Thanks, Jacqueline. So Jacqueline did a great job going over the tools. I'm going to go over what it needs to be in your tools. And the reason we emphasize this is you may work your entire career and never send a message, or maybe just send one WIA message. You cannot wait until that time comes to think, oh, I don't remember how to press the buttons on my system, or oh, I don't recall what I need to do to keep the system running. That would be akin to, the fire department showing up and saying, we never really trained on how to deal with apartment fires, so we're just going to make it do. You can't do that. These are life and death situations that need you to be ready when it comes up. Here are some real world wireless emergency alert messages. These actually showed up on people's phones as being sent by local emergency managers, fire and police agencies. Now, if you're familiar with first responder terminology, that upper left one you probably can figure out is a missing girl, woman. In Salina, 17-year-old white female, Alexis Vidler, with a Texas license plate and a black Mitsubishi Barrage, but we don't know who sent it. We don't know why we're looking for her. She honestly, that could be a suspect in a shooting. And I would think that you would deal with looking for someone that just got accused of shooting up a school different than you would look from someone that is missing because of some special needs. But you don't know who sent it. You don't know what you're supposed to do. You don't know who you're supposed to call if you see that. You don't know if there's a threat that you need to run away from this person, or if this person's in trouble and you need to help her. The lower left one, again, legit message. First off, they're yelling. Never, ever, 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 ever do all caps. Use capital letters to emphasize key phrases. But this one, even I lose some of the translations in here. So they spelled very little out, no punctuation. That's all one sentence. They misspelled insulin. UKN, I think it's supposed to be UNK, unknown, maybe. Direction of travel. There's just, again, if you have to think about this, it's not an effective message. It's something that you need to be able to, anyone walk off the street, that they can at least get 95% of this message right. And this one, if you look at the bottom, it tells you to hold the person. If you have contact with her, hold her. I don't want people being told to go hold someone, hold and notify. So again, just watch that, but really not effective. The upper right one, what area are you staying clear of? And then comply with any directives given by local authorities. You're the local authority. Don't tell me to go look for other local authorities to comply with their directives. The lower right one here, try an alternate route. You're not even going to tell me what alternate route to take. You're just going to tell me to go try some. I don't know what kind of hazardous material it is. Has it been a little bit of, did someone break a mercury thermometer, or is there a nuclear a waste truck that just overturned on the expressway? So again, all these are real world examples of what happens when we send out an ineffective message as we go on through. Button, and then this one, as she pointed out earlier, make sure you don't have templates. They're great to get started, but make sure before you press send that you don't actually push out the add longer WIA message here alert system. Here are the myths of messaging. The first myth is that if we tell them too much, the public is going to panic. Well, that's not really how, generally speaking, the public works. When the public does something that we tell, if you tell them there's an active shooter in the area and people run away, that's good. That's what we want them to do. That's the first step of run, hide, fight is run. So we tend to think that if they run, that they're panicked. That's not panic. That's exactly how we want them to react to these situations. What we don't want them to do is freezing. We don't want them to think, oh, I'm not sure what's going on. I have to read this message again, that first message about the missing 17-year-old. If she was an active shooter, if you think that, if you interpret it as a missing person, well, then you're going to be in bad shape when that active shooter comes on by. So tell them what they need to know. Sometimes, especially if you have a law enforcement background, you don't want to get too specific, and I realize that. But if it's going out on WIA, it's going to be on the news tonight. So don't hold back. Tell them everything they need to know to keep safe. We don't want them to just be frozen and not worry or not have any clue what it is they need to do. There's also myths that shorter warnings are easier to understand. That might be, but generally speaking, they're going to find information one way or another. They need to figure out what's going on. So if you don't provide that information, they're going to go hunting for it. So if you just say, hey, there's a law enforcement situation, I see this far too often. There's a police event occurring, and they'll give off an intersection. What is that police event? Are they collecting money for donations, or are they chasing a man with a gun through the neighborhood? You got to put that in there, because people don't interpret police event or law enforcement situation. They don't interpret it the same way that you may have when you send it out, which kind of goes back to the if we tell them. So if you don't tell them, they're going to find out. And then the other word is that if you have false alarms or cry wolf, well, yeah, if every alert you send out ends up being false, then yes. But the public understands that sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you thought it was going to flood, or sometimes maybe someone called in a fireworks complaint that someone else called as an active shooter. They get it as long as you own your mistake. If something bad goes on, just to say, hey, don't send it out as a WIA, but send out later on and explain to people that, hey, this is what came in, this is how it came in, this is why we pushed it out this way. And you remember the Hawaii ICBM attack? They kind of kept it under quiet for a little bit, and that just absolutely doesn't work. So make sure you're owning your mistake if that happens, because what we want to do, the public mills around. That's the phrase that Jacqueline looked is they don't always necessarily react the way we expect them to. But think about your life. We probably do the same thing too. If you sit in your office right now, with the fire alarms go off, yep, you're going to get up, you're going to grab your phone, you're going to start walking out the door, but you're not going to be in a rush. However, if the fire alarms go off and there's smoke coming out of the room next to you and people are running away, you're probably going to start running. That delay is what we want to reduce. When the tornado warnings are issued, if we're in the Midwest here, if a tornado warning goes off, the first thing we do is go to the front porch to see what we can see. That is human nature. We cannot eliminate that. If you put out a message that says there's been a major explosion, there's some chemicals headed your way, the first thing you're going to do is look out the window. Those are all human nature. What we want to do is reduce that time as much as possible, but there's always going to be a delay. So the delay is, the initial threats detected. There's a report of an explosion with fumes. You are not going to jump right on WIA and EAS and send alert simply on a 911 call. You're going to get out there. The fire chief's going to assess the scene. Command's going to call back in and say, yeah, we've got a chemical. There's a delay there. Then you're going to have to write the warning and press the button. So, it takes time to come up with what wording do you want to put in there? Who does it go to? How do we link this information? What information do we share about evacuation needs? Are we ready with a shelter? That takes time. Then the recipient has to get the message. From the time you press send on a WIA till time it's received is generally 30 seconds, give or take. So that'll be fast, but then they have to read it and they have to understand it. And they have to say, okay, do I trust this? Is this legit? Did I hear a crash? Did I hear a boom? Or are they sending me a tornado warning when it's blue skies out? So they have to go through that processing, and then finally they get to the point where they actually do some activities, do some action. They do something that we've asked them to do. So no matter what we do, there's going to be this delay. What we want to do with our message is make that delay as short as possible. And here are some ways to do it. A good message is simply start off with saying who they're from, not abbreviations. Don't use, ICPD, don't go anything fancy, say Ingham County or Ingham County 911 if you want to. I don't say emergency management because at least in Michigan, most people don't know what emergency management is. Maybe it's different in Hurricane, Florida or New York City, but just say Ingham County. Explain what's going on. Just tell, hey, that we've had an explosion with some chemical leaking on 127. A tanker did it. That's 127 near Mason, just south of Cedar Street. We want the public to get in their houses and seal up all the doors, close the windows, lock the doors, and link them to our Twitter page. Don't use jargon. Don't use anything that if you shared to your family or called grandma and said, Grandma, guess what? There was a CO2, whatever, LH2, make up something. If you can't explain it to grandma, then you don't put it in your WIA message. Don't use block numbers. I'll get into that in a bit. But when you send messages out, people don't know what the 1300 block of anything is. A lot of times those are side streets. So they're not even main roads. So now you got me to figure out what side street it is and then what road it is. And then don't abbreviate. Don't WF a white female. Just put white female, white girl, whatever it is you want. Avoid some of those and you'll have a better message ready to roll as it moves on through. I can tell when an IPAWS message comes from a police officer because they're a suspect or a subject or individual. First off, individual is a long word. Just say person, girl, boy, man, woman, whatever you want to do. Don't say things that as law enforcement, as first responders, we put on our reports. And back in the day, just ignore that. Fled on foot versus ran. I don't know who started fled on foot, but it just doesn't matter. They're not on foot, they ran. They ran from the scene. They're running through the neighborhood with a gun. They're not fleeing through the neighborhood on foot with a gun. We can't say lockdown anymore because on COVID, remember on our COVID days, lockdown meant you could still go to McDonald's or Kroger if you wanted to. A lot of times it's a shortcut for stay indoors, but just be descriptive. Tell people exactly what it is. Say if there's a threat outside, say get into a shelter, lock your doors, close your windows, shut your blinds, and stay in an interior room. Spell that out as much as you can. 360 characters isn't a lot, but I think once you start playing with it, you'll see you can put that information in. And repeating get rid of block numbers, use the closest intersection. Maybe it's not the exact spot, but close enough. Or use a landmark, the post office, the high school, the ball fields, whatever it is that your community would recognize. And then again, any descriptor that doesn't make any sense. 12 yos. Most people don't know what a 12 yo is, especially if, again, we don't get a lot of WIA messages in our state, thankfully. We don't want that first one to have to, if you have to have a decoder ring with your message, it's probably not a good message. So here's the research that we found on what does it. First off, again, start off with a source. Who are you? Because if you've got a phone, you've seen a text message from a variety of places. For the post office sends those quote unquote text messages about that missing package you need to click the link for. Tell them who you are. Don't be anonymous. They may be able to figure out who you are, but especially if you're not from the area and you see a ICPD message, I don't know who that is. Say Ingham County, say Lansing, whatever it is that you need to do. Don't go fancy. Don't go with HSEM or EMHSD, no offense. Don't start acronyms that the general public's not going to explain. Tell them what's going on and what the concern is. Why are you telling someone this information? So say, hey, there's an active shooter in the area, you could shoot you. That's plain and simple. There's a missing person that they've got some special medical needs and could be in serious harm if it doesn't get his medication soon. Great information there. So be descriptive of what the problem is and what's going to happen. Use familiar areas. Don't make people Google, and they probably still may have to in some cases, but be as descriptive as you can. We don't need to be down to the nearest household. That information will come out eventually. Tell people what they need to do to protect themselves and when they need to do it. If you've got a flood coming in an hour, then say, hey, we've got the next hour to prepare for this incoming flood or wildfire, whatever it is going on. Most of our WIAs are now, but sometimes they are for things that may come in the future. Expiration time, that's kind of fallen by the wayside, but nonetheless, it's more weather related. Tornado warnings here until 3 o'clock. The Weather Service does tornado and all weather warnings, so you really don't need to do that. But if the dam, we expect the dam to, if it's going to go, it's going to go by 6 o'clock, and put something like that. But make sure, again, you're creating urgency. This is a potentially life-threatening incident. So make sure it's done, and then watch your reading level. Don't go fancy. Don't put things that people need to look up in the dictionary to be able to interpret. There's a training that Jacqueline's going to talk about. In the meantime, that's a FEMA project that's taken a little longer than expected. But we have a link that we set up here in Emergency Management Region 1 that kind of goes through all the things that you need, and also has a character counter. As Jacqueline emphasized, worry about the 360 first. That's the very first message you want to do. Trim it down then for the 90 character. We have very few phones still use that, but you have to put a 90 in. They won't let you press send without a 90. This form also has a spot for your Twitter, so it lets you trim down to the 280 for Twitter. But put most of your effort in the 360. Look on that list on the message content. Make sure you've got at least the top 5 going. And then put that information in so that you can share it. But again, more information will come from the message design dashboard, which Jacqueline's going to talk about. Here are some real world WEAs that have been sent out. I just collected and kind of gave them, did they consist of the five main components? Here's a good one from Miami-Dade talking about, again, we've got a plant fire. Here's where it's at. That wasn't the exact location, but everyone in Miami knows 97th and 70th Street. And if you're on 69th Street, you'll know you're pretty close, even if you're not a local. It's telling you that the issues are the smoke, what you should do, stay inside, keep the air inside, turn off the AC, things of those nature. And they did push updates out later. So very good message came out of Miami. Here's Beaver County. This is the Pennsylvania side of the Palestine, Ohio train crash. The Palestine side didn't do that good, but Pennsylvania did a great job. Talks about how the threat area might have to evacuate where that involves their county. So again, they talked about who they're from. They talked about what the hazard and the impacts are, where it is, and then what you need to do. You need to evacuate immediately. Jackson County, Georgia, looking for a missing person. Described him. There's no abbreviations in here other than SO, and I'll give him a half point for that. It says it again, it's not a threat. He's not going to come hurt you, but he's having some issues. He doesn't walk well. If you see him, give a call to the 911 center as you see listed there. Boulder County did a okay job. Shelter in place orders. I talked about with lockdown, shelter in place means different things to different people. If you're outside and you get a shelter in place, does that mean you literally stand still? Or, it certainly could in some cases, or do you need to get inside somewhere and be safe? They listed the time to the nearest second and the date and the year. I don't think they need all that, and the area, the location. Again, if you don't know where 11,700 East South Boulder is, but what's a wanted party? Lots of interpretations. If you're police, you absolutely know what a wanted party is. If you're not police, I'm not sure that a wanted party makes a whole lot of sense. So descriptions there, they had a link to more information. So they at least passed the grade there, but avoid phrases like wanted party and don't worry about that. This was a fire. I don't know that a street closure is necessary for a fire. To go out as an actual WEA, that's probably something more better suited for your social media, for your Everbridge, for your rave, things along those lines. But nonetheless, gives us a good message. They don't tell who sent it. My biggest problem was they sent it for the entire county. It was for one block downtown along a park. There's no even buildings in the area that was closed. So you probably did not need to send a WEA at all for this. Probably some barricades on Main Street would have done ample, because your detour involves a 300-yard drive to the next street. So not necessarily a good use of WEA. Here's a real one out of Texas, a traffic advisory for major delays and transportation link. No idea what that is. No idea what they're advising us for. And then they sent us to the link where you have to log in. So it's not even a link to the actual post. That's just their Facebook page. Then you have to enter your Facebook credentials to log in, and then you can finally see what they're doing. So that one did not pass on my grade chart. Here's an East Palestine message. The message is in the middle there, the WEA 360. So it doesn't tell us who sent it. It does tell us there's a derailment. It doesn't tell us what the problem is. It tells us where and kind of tells us to evacuate. So I give them half points on that one. My biggest problem with theirs is their follow-up. The evacuation was lifted. Doesn't say who sent it. Doesn't say what's going on. And then it says to check media outlets for instructions. No, you're the emergency manager. You tell us what the instructions are. Don't send people off on a search for something, because you know what happens if you've been on Twitter before, or Facebook, and people go looking for information, they're going to find it. It might not be what you wanted. So again, just another sign of an incomplete message and the problem it can cause. Here's my my number one. I hold in my back pocket for one of the worst messages ever. Active shooter reported in your area. run, hide, or fight. So the run, hide, fight is great. Loved it. But who sent it? Is there actually someone shooting right now? What is the impact? No load from, but in your area, that's horrible because that went out to a wider area than it was intended for. I could have given them a half point for protective action guidance because they do say run, hide, fight. What this was during last year's school swatting when we were getting those fake calls from overseas VoIP numbers. So they simply got a call that there was a shooter at a school. They put the SWIA out before any messaging at all had confirmed or unconfirmed the report. So again, just to see the issue of what happens when you don't put a good message on. So I'm going to hand back over here just a second. I think that was my So as I hand this back over again, just reminding you to take some time to develop some messages. Jacqueline's going to give us some great resources on how to do that, but don't let that phone call in the middle of the night saying, "Hey, we have a leak at the manufacturing plant, put out an IPAWS message." Don't let that 3 a.m. wake up call be your time to say, "Oh, I need to start figuring out how to write an IPAWS message and send that out." So thanks for paying attention. I'll hand things back.
All right, thanks, Rob. All right, so we talked a lot about what the tools are, some best practices. Now I want to go over some of the basics of becoming an alerting authority. We're doing pretty good in Michigan. We're about 83% of the counties across the state are alerting authorities, but we still have a ways to go. And so just kind of outlining here the steps with FEMA on how to become an alerting authority, get the permissions to be able to send out these types of alerts. So number one there's some web-based training you need to complete, the 247B, and these are through the Emergency Management Institute or EMI. IPAWS for alert originators is required. For those who are like managing their IPAWS program in their county and are responsible for the plans and procedures and making sure everybody is doing what they need to, I would also recommend the 251A, IPAWS for alerting administrators. Kind of goes over more of the administration side of it, but both of them have great information in them. With all of this, there's a lot going on here. So I think the more that you hear and go through these webinars, these trainings, the more that sinks in and the better you'll be at being a great alerting authority. Step 2 in the process is having an IPAWS compatible software program. There are a lot of software programs out there. Not saying any one is better than the other. They're all pretty similar, quite honestly. So pick your tool. Code Red is available, and I see there is a typo there. Code Red is available for free from the state, and I have a slide coming up on that. But EMHSD does have a contract for Code Red, and all Public Act 390 programs in Michigan are able to hop on board our contract and at least use the IPAWS tools in Code Red for free. We cover the cost for that. Step 3 is applying for a memorandum of agreement with FEMA and also applying for public alerting permissions. Step 4, both of those things are done in what's called the IPAWS user portal. It's a portal that FEMA has set up to allow them to track all of this administrative paperwork, basically, for this entire process. So you can request an account on that website and then do all of steps 3 and 4 right in that portal. The nice thing about that portal is they keep all of your documentation in there, so you can go back and refer to it if you need to down the road. So the IPAWS access with Code Red, I mentioned, we do provide that for free. If it's something that you are interested in, not only if that's going to be your primary option for IPAWS messaging, or if you want to use it as a backup method, say you have Everbridge or Rave or something else, just in case those particular vendors are having some sort of issue, you could have Code Red as a backup option for you. Things to keep in mind. If this is something that you're interested in or have questions on, feel free to reach out to me. And my contact information will be at the end, and I can get you started in the right direction here. Mentioned we are at about 83% as far as folks that are compatible with IPAWS. On the map here, everybody in green is good to go. They've completed all of the steps with FEMA. Anybody in blue, and this is to the best of my knowledge at this point, there could be a few others, but they're in progress at some point. They're working through their progress there. And then the folks in gray have not started yet. And we're working really hard at least getting all of the counties with access to IPAWS. That's one of the goals that we have here in the state, so that everybody has these amazing tools to get information quickly to the public at their fingertips. Just a couple of things here on the IPAWS user portal. Just here's a screenshot of it. Again, lots of great administrative information as far as being an IPAWS alerting authority in here. You can list contact information for your key contacts for your jurisdiction as far as IPAWS goes. And then you'll have access to your applications and your certificates. So when you become an IPAWS alerting authority, there is a software certificate that needs to be installed into your whatever your IPAWS software is, your Rave, your Code Red, your whatever. So access to that information would be in the portal, and it also will tell you when those certificates expire because they're only good for 3 years. So again, lots of great information in here. We've mentioned this a couple of times, but kind of along with just getting everybody on with access to IPAWS, the next thing that we're really encouraging is folks to have cross-border MOUs, memorandums of understanding. This is beneficial and helpful in many ways. Not only if there is some sort of emergency at a border and you want to be able to notify, folks in 2 different counties, let's say, about whatever that issue is. Perfect example in the Lansing area, the airport is, right near 3 counties in the area. With a cross-border MOU, you get this MOU in place, agreeing amongst the different jurisdictions that folks are able to not only alert across borders, but also provide backup for one another. You get that MOU in place and then share that with me, and together we'll reach out to FEMA. You'll put an additional alerting application in the portal for the reciprocal counties, and FEMA does the magic and programming on the back end, and then within your software tool, you'll be able to choose, between 3 different counties to send that alert. So, again, we can't encourage this enough, not only, again, for those cross-border issues, but to provide backup, because, you're going to know your neighbors better than we're going to know you at the state. And if for some reason, either you're too busy, you're slammed with responding to whatever that emergency is, or your software tool is out of commission for some reason, but your neighbor has a different one, all of that redundancy is built in with these MOUs. And so not only is it important to get those MOUs in place, but it's also important to practice them as well. So test them out in an exercise, in different capacities, either note or alerting in both counties or just alerting for the other county. All of that is very important to be successful. We also have state and local EAS area plans. This focuses mainly just on the EAS portion of it, working with the Michigan Association of Broadcasters and your broadcast community. But there are requirements for these plans to be in place. And this is where you can really iron out and work through how EAS works in your area, because each broadcaster might have their systems programmed a little bit differently. All of that is outlined in the state and local area plans. The state plan was just updated well, the one with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, updated in June of 2022. It's since been updated with little tweaks and changes. The state EAS plan that we have to really outline more of this was approved almost a year ago. And so now I am working with the Michigan Association of Broadcasters. This has taken a little longer than we had hoped, but we're going to be working with the local areas to make sure those local plans are updated as well. Really outlining, who is who and what permissions everybody has. The Michigan Association of Broadcasters also coordinates the required monthly test schedules. So those are the tests that go live out over TV and radio that everyone's probably familiar with, the tone that you hear. And this is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The MAB coordinates that. And in some areas, they even work with the local emergency managers to issue those RMTs. So that's another way to practice, to get to know your broadcasters and to get a little more testing in. So that's something you would want to work with your local broadcasters on. Once you are an alerting authority, FEMA requires you to send a monthly proficiency demonstration test. So this is just a test to their test server. So nothing goes on the live side. It's all on the test side. And you would send out, if you had permissions to send out EAS WIA and non-weather emergency messages through the weather radio, you would test all of those routes in these monthly proficiency demonstration tests. Each alerting authority is required to do one a month. FEMA keeps track of that and sends me reports quarterly on how everybody is doing. If I find a jurisdiction that has not been completing these tests, I will reach out to them, kind of see what's going on, make sure they remember to do them, get them squared away on that. If you go too long without doing this, FEMA can, and I think they actually have started to shut off permissions to send alerts for those jurisdictions until they come back up to speed on the monthly proficiency tests. So they're important to do, and they're a great opportunity for you to definitely get practice on your software, because not only are you going to have to come up with a good, clear message, you also have to figure out how to get that into your software. And when that emergency is happening is not when you want to be figuring that out. So this is a good way to get comfortable and familiar with your software, and then also keep in mind, your messaging and all of that. They have an iPause message viewer, a website that you can go to make sure that your messages got through. I always double check to make sure that whatever I just sent shows up there and I know I'm good for that month. So keep that in mind. Make sure everybody is doing those. The public alerting work group, Rob and I are co-chairs on this work group. It's part of the statewide interoperable communications board. We work and with various folks across the state, from the local emergency managers, 911, the Michigan Association of Broadcasters, National Weather Service, everybody who's kind of engaged and involved in alerts and warnings. We work through this work group to put out best practices, put out trainings like this, figure out, how we can assist everybody in being better alerting authorities. So there's lots of great references and resources on our website that's listed there. I will also, in the next week or so, be posting this webinar on there. Please take a look at that. We continue to update this website as we have more great information to share. And if you're interested in being a part of the work group, please reach out to me after this webinar, and I'd be happy to add you to it. Some of the strategic efforts, again, just for the work group, as I mentioned, getting everybody on board as an IPAWS alerting authority, making sure that everybody has good plans in place, providing the resources so that they can pull those plans together, augmenting public alerting education. So anything we can do to share webinars that are happening across the country or providing training like this, we're looking to do more of that. And then the last two focus more on the EAS plans, but making sure that those are up to speed and we get some more engagement between the broadcasters and the local emergency managers. Some of the deliverables that we've been able to accomplish in the last couple of years, we've got the training that we're all taking part in right now that we will be posting for folks to reference down the road. We also have a 4-hour-ish advanced message development workshop that it kind of goes through the various things that Rob talked about and gives you some hands-on practice to that and just kind of hone in on what really comprises a good message. And then we also provide various templates on the website, the public alerting website, plan templates, MOU templates, different things that folks have shared, that they pulled them together and have shared it with others, and you can make it your own. So you're not starting from scratch. There's a variety of resources from FEMA. You'll have links to all of these. There's tons of resources out there. So definitely don't spend time reinventing the wheel. Take what is out there and make it your own, and continue to learn from others is really the main thing to talk about here. I've also listed the FEMA IPAWS email address and phone number. There's always somebody available from FEMA to answer your questions and help you along as well. So lots of support out there. There is an IPAWS program planning toolkit. This toolkit will help you kind of step you through all of the components of a well-written alert and warning plan, and make sure you consider these different things that should be in there. Steps you right through it, and then kind of leaves you with a good plan outline that you can tweak and make it to the style of your agency. So again, you're not starting from scratch. And this is just kind of a screenshot of what the different pieces of the alert and warning plan would be. So you've got your system information, your SOPs, your messaging templates, all of these things to consider, because it's not good enough just to go through the steps to becoming an alerting authority if you don't have everything thought out ahead of time. So you're not scrambling at the last minute. And then, as Rob had alluded to, there is what's called the message design dashboard. And so FEMA has worked with the University of Albany to pull this together. They've done a ton of research on the elements that make a good alert and warning message. And what the dashboard does is it kind of uses all of this research and data that they've collected, and you're able to kind of walk through and choose from options depending on what's happened, whether it's a shelter-in-place situation or an evacuation situation or a fire, active shooter, all of those things. And you fill in, some key pieces of information, choosing, what some of the template pieces are, and it will compile a message for you. And, it works through character counts and reading levels and all of that, where you can, pull together a really clean, concise message. So there are training sessions available, and I have a link on the slide there. You do have to go through a training class in order to get access to this message design dashboard. They go through, a lot of the things that we've talked about today and in more detail. And then once you have access to the message design dashboard, you can use it at your own pace to create, various templates on the hazards that are common in your area. I can't recommend it enough to go through the training and get access to it. It is an amazing program. Here's a screenshot just of kind of give you an idea of, you kind of pick and choose the wording that you want to use, and it will help you compile and put together a great message that includes all of those elements that are necessary. If you're interested in more on message development, there is a link to a really great presentation, a prep talk from Dr. Dennis Moletti, talking about the research on alerts and warnings and guidance on how to write effective alert messages. So he's kind of the grandfather of all of this research of getting this information out there. So really great resources to be had from here. So moral of the story, I know we've gone a little bit over the hour that we allotted for this, but really what we want you to take away from this is, there's multiple things that you need to be concerned with. First off, you need to be comfortable with the knowledgeology of your platform. You need to know how to use your software, how to navigate around, what all the buttons mean, how they work. Exercise and practice with it. That's the purpose of those monthly proficiency demonstration tests, to get you comfortable in the software. You also need to be comfortable generating messages. Think about the hazards in your area and come up with some templates using the message design dashboard so that you're ready to go. You might need to tweak it, a little bit specific for that, whatever, that particular event, but you're not starting from scratch. Know what to use when. Use WIA for life safety threats, things that are major inconveniences. You need to keep people out of an area, but don't overuse it. It's not a replacement for a mass notification system. People can turn their WIAs off. It is possible. So use it judiciously, but use it when it's important. That is a great way to get that information out there and save lives. So I want to thank you for joining us today. Here is our contact information. Please reach out if you have any questions or want to talk any more about any of these topics. I do see there is one question in the chat about alerting authorities lower than the county. With the county's permission, cities and townships that are Public Act 390 emergency management programs can have access to IPAWS, but they are only given permissions to send out WIA messages, because that's something that you can, narrow down to something smaller than a county level. But kind of we work with the county to, see if they want to allow that to happen. So the county has kind of the overall authority over the entire county for alerts and warnings.